Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum everyone. I'm a member of CPS International. Islam, being a revealed religion, should be understood from its original scriptures, which is Quran, the word of God, and the teachings and life of the Prophet. These sessions, comprising of 30 minutes, bring to you the message of the Quran and Hadith. The contents of this talk are based on the understanding of Islam as presented in CPS literature. For further information, kindly log on to our websites and Facebook. Today, we'll attempt to describe the Islamic concept of the Judgment Day. We shall also see how human psychology and modern science also predict the end of the world. We shall then conclude the session by discussing what should be a response to the fact that the world is indeed going to end. Belief in the Day of Judgment is a fundamental article of faith in Islam. It is also referred to in the Quran as the hour, day of the account, day of the gathering, day of the reckoning, day of distress, and great announcement. The Islamic concept of the Judgment Day tells us that the world as we know it will come to an end one day. This is the Doomsday or the Judgment Day. On Doomsday, God will unravel all veils. All things that were hidden and unseen from view will appear as clear as daylight. This will be the day of judgment when no action done in the world will remain hidden. Even a tiny good deed or bad deed done in the world will appear as plain as daylight. On this day, all virtuous human beings will be rewarded for their good deeds, whatsoever they may have been, and all corrupt and depraved people will be doomed for their bad deeds, whatsoever they may have been. Referring to doomsday or the last day, the Quran says, when the earth is shaken with its violent shaking, when the earth shakes off her burdens, when man asks, what's happening to her? On that day it will narrate its account, for your Lord has so directed it. On that day, people will come forward in separate groups to be shown their deeds. Whoever has done the smallest particle of good will see it, while whoever has done the smallest particle of evil will see it. Chapter 99, verses 1 to 8. When the earthquake of doomsday strikes, it will be a proclamation of the termination of the period of trial. This will mean that the freedom which people had been allotted for the purpose of them being tested has been taken away from them. Then the time will have come for people to receive their just deserts. People eat, drink, and make merry in this world. They establish themselves in comfortable homes. They seek to win promotion in life. They believe or reject matters at will. They are free to do and say what they like. They strive to excel in whatever department of life they choose. Man has been deluded by his worldly position. He thinks that what he owns in this world will always be his. He forgets that he is being put to the test. Everything he possesses and every power which he wields in this ephemeral world are mere tools to test him. Nothing that he has will last. Everything will be taken away from him. He will be stripped of even the most basic of the worldly amenities he used to enjoy. He will be brought before the Lord of the universe to be judged. All disparity between human beings will disappear on the day of judgment. Fear of God will seal everybody's tongue. Injustice will benefit no one. Truth will be inescapable. Man will stand alone. He'll be answerable for his actions to God. Referring to the concept of accountability, the Quran says, when the sky is cleft asunder, and when the stars are scattered, when the seas overflow, and when the graves are laid open, then everyone will know what he has sent ahead and what he has left behind. Oh man, what is it that lures you away from your bountiful sustainer who created you, fashioned you, and proportioned you in whatever form he pleased? Yet you deny the last judgment. Surely there are guardians watching over you, noble recorders, who know all that you do. The virtuous will dwell in bliss, whereas the wicked will be in hell, which they shall enter on the day of judgment, and from which they'll find no escape. What will make you realize what the day of judgment will be? Again, what will make you realize what the day of judgment will be? It will be a day when no human being shall be of the least avail to any other human being. God alone will hold command on that day. Chapter 82, verses 1 to 19. Given the gravity of this certain catastrophe, it is ironic that people are most forgetful of the judgment day. People fail to realize that their own inadequacies should be their prime concern, not those of others. The only time they feel concerned with themselves is when their comforts, convenience, safety are threatened. Then they make strenuous efforts to see that these aspects of their lives should never be challenged in any way. But just as a hungry man thinks first and foremost of his own hunger, so should a moral, social being think first and foremost of his own conduct and not of his own convenience or of the faults of others. It'll only be when the day of judgment is upon us and the truth made plain that this realization will come to man. On that day will everyone be held accountable for their deeds. Therefore, it follows that the belief in the day of judgment is linked with the belief that man is accountable to God. He is being watched by God and his actions are being recorded by God's angels. Though he is free in this world, in the next world, he will be held accountable for every thought, speech, and action that he made in this world. Let us now see how the concept of the day of judgment is embedded in human nature. The present world is full of strange paradoxes. Here, birds chant hymns of divine praise, while man recites eulogies to himself. Stars and planets continue their voyages without clashing with one another, while man willfully sets himself on a collision course with others. In this world, there's no tree which undermines another, but men spend their lives plotting one another's destruction. Lofty, upright trees show their meekness by casting their shadows on the ground. But if man ascends to any heights, he immediately becomes arrogant. This attitude of man's is totally contrary to God's will for his entire creation. This state of affairs demands that there must be a world where everyone gets what one deserves. Doomsday shall erase these paradoxes. The might of all except God shall be eradicated. When this period of trial has run its course, God will destroy the present world and create another one. There, the righteous and the wicked will be separated from one another. The former will reside in paradise, and the latter will have to face deprivation and regret. Today, the world of God appears to be silent, but on the day of judgment, everything will be given the power of speech. Present day inventions and discoveries have proved that even lifeless objects have the power of speech. Studio performances can be fully replayed by recording sets. Similarly, the present world is like a huge divine studio. Whatever man does or says is being preserved at every moment. And when the time comes, the story of everyone will be repeated in such a way that neither great nor small sayings and doings will escape God's attention. We must foresee the coming of that day before its arrival. Those who fail to see it coming before it is upon them will have to pay dearly for their short-sightedness. The present world may seem to lack nothing, but the order of this world has been established with the trial of man in mind. According to God's scheme, only a world which leads up to reward and punishment can be considered ideal and permanent. This is not the case in the present world. So, when the period of trial is over, God will destroy this world and create another one, more complete one. There, the evil will be separated from the righteous, and all will be confronted with the just consequences of their deeds. For the observance of proper behavior in this world, man requires only one thing. A person should firmly remember that he is under divine surveillance at every moment. The deeds of his entire life will be presented in the court of God. Be these great or small, done secretly or publicly, everything will be there on record. If man is fully convinced of this reality, he will be shaken completely even before the world is shaken. Before the all-encompassing earthquake of doomsday, he will experience an earthquake in his own soul, which will change him completely. As a result, he'll become his own keeper. He will adopt a disciplined life instead of a life of indulgence. He will use his powers as guided by the command of God instead of acting on his whims and desires. There's another approach to understand the Day of Judgment. We may call it psychological justification of the Day of Judgment. Everyone knows that killing innocent people and giving others weapons to kill them is a crime against God and humanity. Yet those who wield their power in this world continue to kill and even take pride in their action when it serves their interests. They think that their power gives them a license to kill. Those who perpetrate these crimes against humanity are recorded as heroes. Those who wield political and economic power oppress others without anyone to stop them. In this world, they are never brought to justice. The human conscience demands that such people be brought to justice. It cries out, who is going to take away their license to kill, their license to oppress? In a world where the human conscience and the order of the whole universe demands justice, it is inconceivable and unacceptable to think that some people should indulge in games of death and destruction and are allowed to go without paying for their crimes. There must come a day when the powerful are made powerless and made to answer for their actions, when those who innocently died at their hands are invited to bear witness against their persecutors. That will be the day of judgment, the day when the owner of all true power brings justice to the world and punishes those to whom he gave power as a test and who mercilessly misused it. Addressing the whole of humanity, God says in the Quran, do you imagine that we created you without any purpose and that you would not be brought back to us? Chapter 23, verse 115. Further, the Quran says, blessed is he in whose hand is the kingdom. He has power over all things. He created death and life so that he might test you and find out which of you is best in conduct. He is the mighty, the most forgiving one. Chapter 67, verses 1 and 2. Following the first man and woman, Adam and Eve, vast numbers of human beings have taken birth and populated the earth. This process of taking birth and populating the earth is still continuing. However, in line with God's creation plan, God seeks only those people, men and women, who will prove to be the best indeed. According to God's creation plan, although man was created as an eternal being, he is not to stay on planet Earth eternally. The present planet Earth is only a temporary residence for him. The day this temporary period here gets over is called Doomsday or the Day of Judgment. According to God's creation plan, God has arranged for two very necessary and important things for man. These are life support system and the moral support system. In recent times, man has irreparably destroyed these two support systems and in this way has lost the justification to continue to exist on planet Earth. Man had to live here and act while keeping the natural system of the earth intact. He did not have the right to destroy this system, keeping in mind that one day man has to give an account of his life. In this transient world, man should have been extra careful while making use of the blessings of God. Instead, he mercilessly and carelessly destroyed these two support systems. We will now see how man destroyed these support systems. When God settled man on earth, he made available all the material things that were necessary for the surviving and flourishing of a species like man. For instance, oxygen, water, light, food. In modern terms, these are called the life support system. Man's creator settled man on this planet for a limited period. That is why the various components of the life support system have been arranged for in limited quantity. These components cannot be used in an unlimited way. For instance, the life support system has been arranged in line with man's natural needs. But if man, in hedonistic pursuit of pleasure, begins to exploit the life support system in an unlimited way, it will lead to a gross imbalance in the system of nature, leading to what is called in the Quran corruption. And this is exactly what has happened in the modern age. In order to seek to fulfill his unlimited desires and to surround himself with all manner of luxuries, man established huge factories that manufactured all sorts of things. Many of these factories catered to man's insatiable greed, not his needs. Now, in this world of choice, the system established by God is based on need, not on greed. But because of man pursuing his own whims, this balance was destroyed. In this way, man deviated from the path established by nature. A frightening result of this emerged in the form of air pollution, water pollution, noise pollution. It is this development that is termed in the Quran as fasad fil ard, which means spreading corruption in the land. Chapter 7, verse 85 talks about this. The fuel that was used in the factories produced an enormous calamity in the form of carbon emissions. As a result of this, the entire atmosphere was filled with poisonous gases. The seas were a means for supplying pure water, but now they were filled with industrial pollutants that were emptied into them by rivers. The great reservoir of water in the form of oceans was lethally polluted up to 95%. Pollution and other forms of environmental devastation caused many species that were crucial for man's health to become extinct. Man has no replacement for these losses. Scientists across the world are now declaring that the dangerous damage that has been caused to the life support system on Earth is irreversible. Another result that modern industry has led to is that super problem that is called global warming. Scientists are warning that with just a few years, things will become so deadly that the earth will become completely uninhabitable for any living creature. Planet Earth was given for the use of man to the extent of his needs, but man defied all limits and boundaries. He wanted to exploit the bounties of the earth to wallow in luxury. As a result of this, he caused such havoc on earth that he has now lost all justification to continue living here. It appears that the time has now finally arrived when man will be expelled from earth. It is this day of expulsion from the earth that is termed doomsday or the day of judgment. God created man on true nature. Chapter 30, verse 30. God placed within man a criterion to distinguish between good and evil. Chapter 91, verse 8 of the Quran. Then God placed within man the conscience, which is called the nafs al-lawwama, or the self-reproaching soul. So says chapter 75, verse 2. This self-reproaching soul is an internal guide for every person. At every moment, it gives a person knowledge of good and evil, right and wrong. This entire system that has been established at the level of the psyche is a sort of moral support system for man. It is there so that at every moment and at every turn in life, one can be firmly established on the path of goodness and be prevented from going astray. In the present age, man has committed the heinous crime of destroying this moral support system that was established by God. We have witnessed the rise of numerous ideologies that sought to undermine or even destroy the moral support system. For instance, there is a school of thought according to which there is no such thing as divine nature and which teaches that man's nature is only a social phenomenon. Another school of thought gave the highest priority to personal interests, which took over the place that was once occupied by ethics. It preached that the greatest happiness of the greatest number should be the aim of all action. It believes that the value of anything is determined solely by its utility. This ideology preaches that personal happiness or personal interest is the only thing of worth in a person's life. According to this ideology, man should unhesitatingly adopt whatever gives him happiness and whatever he believes is in accordance with his material interests. There is no need for one to heed the conscience or the voice of nature if these go against his happiness or perceived personal interests. This ideology rendered as wholly relative the moral support system in the affairs of life. In this way, the ethical or moral system was rendered for all practical purposes ineffective. Another ideology that produced the same result of rendering the moral support system ineffective was to convince people that there's no such thing as absolute moral values. Many ideologies such in line with man's lust were popularized across the world. As a result of this, a permissive society came into being, characterized among other things by the notion that one should live in the now. Its culture was based on instant gratification. Right here, right now was one of its reigning dogmas. One of its many consequences was that people began to consider meaningful notions of do's and don'ts as obsolete and meaningless. Restrictions on things harmful to human beings' health and social life were done away with. The purpose of life became simply to earn and enjoy. For present day man, all moral values are relative, not real or absolute. Openly or otherwise, people now believe that there is no fixed principle to distinguish between good and evil. They think virtue and sin are both a matter of personal choice. The moral support system that God had established was a very important aspect of human life. It was an internal guarantee for keeping man established on the straight path. It was a necessary component of God's creation plan. But man's misuse of his freedom has taken him to the final extreme, leading to an almost complete collapse of the moral support system. We have now seen that Islamic scriptures, human nature, and science are all unanimous that the end of the world is a reality. It is only natural for us to prepare for this grave event. The situation loudly declares that the countdown has now entered its final stage. It is as if the angel of the day of judgment is now knocking on our door and telling us, today's day is the last day for you. If you don't willingly come to your senses today, tomorrow you will be compelled to do so. But to do so tomorrow won't be of any use. The present world has not been given to man as any sort of reward, nor on account of any supposed right. This world has been made by God, and God has blessed man with it only for one purpose. That sole purpose is that human beings be kept in the conditions of this world, and it be seen who among them measure up to the desirable divine standards. These individuals will be selected and settled in the ideal world of paradise. In the present age, man made enormous discoveries of nature's treasures. Following this, he ought to have acknowledged God even more. It should have made him even more devoted to God, and in this way, obtain a prominent place in the list of selected individuals eligible for paradise. But the actual result was just the opposite. Man set off on the path of rebellion. Instead of fulfilling his responsibilities, he busied himself in trying to build a dream world of comfort and enjoyment in this very world, right here, right now. This is an apt way of describing modern man's worldview, ignoring tomorrow and living only in the today. Modern man seeks a life of comfort and pleasure in the world of today because he believes there's nothing beyond it. This is the creed of confession of almost every person today, whether they explicitly announce it or not. Today, ideologically justified materialism has become the dominant worldview. This is without any doubt whatsoever the final level of evil. There simply cannot be any level of evil beyond this. This state of affairs is completely against God's creation plan. From this, it is proven that man has now lost the right to continue to be able to live on earth. It's now time to understand the urgency and certainty of the day of judgment. In the last quarter of the 20th century, signs of this decision of God began to emerge. And as soon as the 21st century dawned, such signs began appearing that inform us that the final time has now indeed arrived. Now man will not get any respite. This announcement of the end of human history appeared in the form of an accepted scientific phenomenon and became a daily news item. You can now hear or read about it every single day. Every day there's some news or the other about it in the media. This is the phenomenon of what is called global warming. Consider, for example, this article which appeared in the Times of India, New Delhi, 25th June 2008. NASA warming expert says this is the last chance. Exactly 20 years after warning America about global warming, a top NASA scientist said the situation has gotten so bad that the world's only hope is drastic action. James Hansen told Congress that the world has long passed the dangerous level for greenhouse gases in the atmosphere and needs to get back to 1988 levels. He said, Earth's atmosphere can only stay this loaded with man-made carbon dioxide for a couple more decades without changes such as mass extinction, ecosystem collapse, and dramatic sea level rises. We are toast if we don't go on a very different path. Hansen, director of the Goddard Institute of Space Sciences, who's sometimes called the godfather of global warming science, said, this is the last chance. Hansen brought global warming home to the public in June 1988 during a US heat wave. Hansen said that in 5 to 10 years, the Arctic will be free of sea ice in the summer. What is today called global warming is actually a global warning. It is an announcement from the creator of the universe that the time for the end of human history has now come very close. So hurry up to try to have your name included in the list of people selected for paradise, because very soon the time will come when the chance for this will finally be over. Lockdowns and restrictions imposed due to COVID-19 outbreak are leading to loss of jobs, extreme poverty, and complete return to normalcy is nowhere in sight. Coupled with the loss of lives, it's eye-opening for us. We are led to believe that slowly we are heading towards more and more difficult times. It will ultimately lead towards the end of so many blessings which we were enjoying. The unpredictability of it all tell us that the time for the end of human history might have now come very close. It is then very important to realize the truth of the matter and then prepare accordingly. It's time for man to wake up and spend his remaining time in repentance, realizing and acknowledging the Creator and His creation plan for us, and preparing for the post-death phase of life. Conditions tell us that man has lost the justification to continue to live on this present earth. Now, in line with God's creation plan, very soon the next stage of human history will begin, when the individuals selected for eternal paradise will be settled there and the rest will be rejected and left to lead a life of debasement and deprivation forever. The formula right here, right now, is used by the present day man in his heedless pursuit of enjoyment in this present world. The time has now come to use the same formula for the next phase of his life, which is the post-death period. One must start right away right now, and right here, living in such a way that one may be able to lead a joyful life in the eternal world of paradise, in the life after death. Is the end of today's session. Please log in every Saturday at 7:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time to participate in this class. Mail your feedback and questions, if any, on this topic to feedbackqa.cfp@gmail.com. Thank you for your precious time and interest. God willing, we'll meet next Saturday, the 31st of July 2021. The last of our call will be Glory be to God, the Lord of the universe.